guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing my favorite fall palettes, and I have about 20 here because I just could not stop myself from pulling out. Oh, and this one looks like a fall palette, and so does this one. Now, I am not a person who does my makeup specifically seasonally, as if you cannot tell, but I am a person who is drawn to certain palettes during certain times of year and not drawn to them at any other time of year. And I think that that is where these palettes come in. I have been thinking a lot about these specific palettes. They have been on my mind pretty heavy, and I think it's because we're about ready to roll into fall. I'm not going to use probably all these palettes in the fall time, and this doesn't include some of my new palettes that you guys may have already seen in my makeup rehab series last month or will see in my upcoming makeup rehab series. It doesn't include any of those, just palettes that are in my collection. Also, some of these palettes aren't available anymore. I will link whatever palettes are still available down in my description box for you. But with that said, I'm super excited to walk through these palettes with you, so I hope that you're excited for it as well. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I am a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also am a field leader for Ulta Beauty, so I get a lot of education in my position. I'd like to bring you that education here through utilization of the products or reviews. I also just am into self-care, like I said, and this is my self-care. I really like to talk about makeup. It soothes my soul, warms my heart, and I hope that it does the same for you here on my channel. I hope that you'll find that this channel brings you as much joy as it brings me, and you'll want to subscribe before you go. And before I move into today's video, I want to friendly reminder everybody, I do have a giveaway going on. That giveaway video will be linked in the cards for you. It goes on through the end of September. I will be picking my winner the first week of October. And I hope that you want to jump in on this extravaganza, because that's what it is. Every single year, it is my annual giveaway on my channel. So thank you guys for joining me today, and let's just roll into this video where we're talking about some of my favorite fall time palettes. So we're not going to go in any particular order, but I will tell you that there's probably about 6 of these palettes in here are Natasha Denona palettes. I have an awful lot of Natasha Denona in my collection. If you're not new here, you know that. So a good majority of these palettes are from the Natasha Denona line. But I have several that are not, of course. I think I have probably around 25 palettes here. I don't know exactly how much. Let's start with what I really envision for fall time looks. And I think that it goes into all of the same things that everybody else thinks of in fall time, right? It's the deep moody tones, the like oranges and the reds and the greens that are really vibrant for the leaves in the fall time, but also like deep moody like jewel tones are really my jam during the fall time as well. So that's kind of the inspiration behind picking all of these palettes, was that thought process. These are palettes that I use any time of year, but these are palettes that typically call to me during the fall time specifically. So jumping right in no particular order, I do have first the ABH Norvina Collection Mini Pro Pigment Palette Volume 1, and this is what it looks like. At the end of summer, it's the perfect like fall-esque, summer-esque eyeshadow palette to get you from summer into fall. I would say this is probably beginning of fall, typically right around the September timeframe, maybe even the first parts of October is when this really draws my attention. I think the biggest reasons why, honestly, are because of this like L shape worth of shades here, because they're kind of those moody like purples and pinks that I think about when I think about jewel tones for the fall time. These two here are really more of that summer time frame, which is what puts this into the like very beginning of fall time eye look palette for me. But I really do think about this palette an awful lot during this time of year. Next, I have the Huda Love Fest palette. This is one of her Obsessions palettes. It is those purples and oranges that I really just honestly do not feel like make a great color story for an eye look, except for during this time of year. These remind me of those like moody shades that I'm going to say moody so many times. Don't turn this into a drinking game, but these remind me of those moody shades of some of those more vibrant shades that we see during the summer that kind of transition you right into fall. Now, I wouldn't say that this is a beginning of fall time color story, but I would say that this is probably a mid-fall time color story, not quite winter, right? So it's definitely that middle point of fall time color stories, in my humble opinion. It's got those perfect moody purples in there. And the next one would have to be my Angelica Nyquist Odin's Eye collab for last year, which is the Trick or Treat palette. I think that this perfectly resembles a fall time palette. Like, there is nothing about this palette that screams any other season other than fall, except for maybe this bright, brilliant green right here. But even still, like, that's not even my most favorite shade in this palette. I had a decent time with this palette. It wasn't my favorite palette to play with, honestly, but I do really love the moody mattes in this palette. This mustardy orange yellow is fabulous. Another one that screams nothing but fall is the Melt Bad Side Earth palette for the Zodiac series that they did. This one encompasses Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn and reminds me a lot of a miniature Subculture. I actually have Subculture in here. Let me get it and bring it out for you guys. This is a palette that is the epitome of fall time, and this one reminds me of a miniature version of it. And I think that you guys can see that in just looking at them side by side. So Melt Bad Side Zodiac palette. This is Virgo season. Virgo season is the kickoff to fall. So I think that this really does encompass all things fall when we're thinking about the color stories. And then going back to the Subculture palette, this was iconic in its time frame because these shadows weren't done ever prior to this point in a palette all on its own. I have never had a horrible time with this, and this palette I did pick up when it launched. This was the first palette that I had, I think it was the first palette that I had set a timer for at its original launch time. And I think you guys have probably heard this story before, but paused a meeting that I was having to excuse myself to go make the purchase of this palette because I was just so excited about it. And it truly is the epitome of fall. Like, I could see these tones all over my face all fall long. Following up with another ABH palette, I do have the ABH Jackie Aina palette. I do think that this one resembles fall in my mind, mostly because of this side of the palette over here, from about this like kind of moody, grungy, like purpley pink color all the way over. Not so much these shades here, but the rest of this palette really does have that moody aspect to it in its color story. It's got a couple of surprises in there for like how it appears in the pan versus how it appears on your eyes. Both this one and this one are a little bit of a shiftier kind of like industrial looking shadow, and I really do think that this one also screams fall. You could also probably take a drink every time I say it screams fall. I'm gonna make myself sick saying it screams fall, so I'm gonna try not to say it anymore. But you guys tell me, what do you think about this one? This one reminds me of all the different kinds of apples that we get during the fall season. So, you know, we have Golden Delicious and we have Granny Smith and we have Roma. And no, Roma is a tomato, right? This reminds me of an orchard full of apples. And I think that that is why it reminds me of fall, to be honest, because it's about like seasonal fruits and vegetables that just pop into the market and are so delicious during this time of year. This is apple orchard in a nutshell, and that, for whatever reason, also reminds me of fall. Another one that reminds me of fall is Sigma Untamed. So this one is probably the first Sigma palette, and truly really the only Sigma palette that drew me in. It was launching and I was like, I have to have that palette. And I think the biggest reason why is because this color story is very grungy, very fall vibes, and I just feel it on a spiritual level, I think. And it's also a palette that I have really fond memories of because I did a collaboration with my friend Aina with this palette, and I think that it could lean actually very winter as well. So this would be probably end of fall time eyeshadow palette. You know, when I think of like how your mood shifts from summer to fall to winter and gets like, you know, super happy and joyous to maybe a little bit more subdued and withdrawn to like just desperate for sunshine. That's kind of where I see this palette sitting, in my humble opinion. Let's do a couple of Natasha so that we don't get them all at the same time. This one is the Natasha Denona Zendo palette. Listen, I think that this one is the perfect color story for beginning of and kind of leaning into interim mid fall, because it's got these beautiful like pinks here, goes into like these sunsetty looks up here, and then this like grungy, like almost wintry kind of blues and greens. So this one is a really good transitional all throughout fall palette, in my humble opinion. And then we have the Natasha Denona My Dream palette, which has such beautiful deep jewel tone purples and pinks in it that just creates a really, I have sticker, because I am a decorative planner also, that's just a hobby of mine that I don't like video or anything, but happy planner is my jam and stickers are my jam and all the things. Like I've been a fan of stickers since I was a very, very young girl, right? This reminds me of my favorite sticker book during the fall, and it is Moody Florals or something like that, where it's just all deep, dark, like almost black purple florals, and that is what this palette reminds me of. When I think of like a floral bouquet during the fall time, I think of like black and burgundy roses, and that's what this gives. Deep enough but also colorful enough that I feel like it totally fits the bill. And then of course we have something like the Natasha Denona Sunset palette, that is the palette that I really think of moving from summer into fall, with the sunsets, maybe even late summer, right? During like maybe fire season, and I'm from Eastern Washington where fire season was like typical every single year. The sky just is full of these colors in like late August, like early September. This is the epitome, in my humble opinion, of a fall eyeshadow palette. Again, with jewel tones, let's go into Mikayla, the Mikayla Part 2 palette by Glamlite. Really beautiful, deep, dark, grungy, almost jewel tones. This, I think I even said when I was reviewing this palette, this reminds me very much of a fall tone eyeshadow palette because of those jewel tones. And I don't know why, but jewel tones for me is more of like a fall time thing. And I think that it's because they're just so deep and moody, honestly. Another palette that I have pulled out as the epitome of fall, because I've said that 100 times, is the Tarte Maneater After Dark palette. And if I remember correctly, this did roll out in the fall time, so it makes sense that this is a fall time eyeshadow palette. What I don't think is super fall about it, honestly, is a lot of the creamier tones over here. Maybe even this like pink, I think is a little bit too like bright, but this whole side of the palette reminds me of fall so dang much. And I don't even think about this palette except for during this time of year. This one reminds me a lot of that, but I like this one more as far as the formula goes. I like Violet Voss a lot, and this reminds me of the Tarte Man-Eater After Dark palette in its color story. Again, maybe not so much these guys here, but this whole side of the palette, for sure, these 3 rows remind me so much of fall time and the eye looks that, the colors and the eye looks that I am trying to create during that time of year. We also have one that I think I put into this video every single year, and that is the Norvina Volume 3 Pro Pigment Palette. This truly is just all the colors that you could ask for from fall. And when I think about not only the stickers that I'm placing into my planner, but also like the leaves that are changing on the trees, or the colors that people are wearing, or like the makeup that's coming out, it is sometimes, most often, these deep like berry tones, these oranges, these in your face kind of deeper tones for some of the more vibrant shades that we see all summer and spring long. So I think they're just a step up from what you're going to see during the winter time. Now this one for me, I think could filter back and forth between winter and fall, but I do think it is more fall, just because it does have a lot of that brightness, but it still has a lot of those deep, moody, grungy shades while still being colorful. So this is the Morphe Boss Mood palette that I got as a gift from a partner when I worked at Starbucks that I had trained, and one of the only Morphe palettes that I absolutely love in my collection, and that I absolutely love prior to it being in my collection. Like, I remember wanting that palette so bad way back when before I had, you know, determined that I thought that Morphe was truly awful formulation for shadow, but those ones are not bad. I really do enjoy that palette a lot. I also have this one from Pat McGrath. This is the Pat McGrath Mothership 2 Sublime. And this is the first Pat McGrath palette that I think I own. First Pat McGrath Mothership palette that I think I owned. It's so old in my collection that I don't even have the like piece of like cardboard that showcases the names of these shades, so I couldn't tell you what the names of these shades are. But I think what does it for me, honestly, is these 2 shadows here. This kind of like moody pinky purple shade, and then this really brilliant green really kind of do it for me in terms of me thinking that this palette reminds me of fall. And it's truly, like, as much as it pains me to say this, it's truly the only time I ever think about this palette is when I'm down there looking at my palette, like face to face with it, or during the fall time when I think I should create a look with that palette. Maybe I'll bring this one into my No Pan Left Behind for this quarter so that I get some use out of it for the fall time season. A newer one to me, one that you guys just saw me review, is going to be this Bailey Sarian Fatally Yours collaboration with Melt. And I did say during that collaboration review, or during that review, that this reminded me very, very much of a fall time palette. I think it probably is the same for almost everybody. This very, very much resembles something that you should be using on your eyes during this time of year. Just again, with the colors of the leaves and the color of like maybe even the sky outside during this time of year, minus this like baby blue that's not really actually baby blue, even though it looks baby blue in here. It's more of a steely blue. So that is the color of the sky around where I'm at anyways during this time of year, if it's going to be a blue sky. Almost dropped that palette. Did you guys see me jump? I love this palette and the thought process of this palette during the fall season. I'm not sure if I think of this as a fall palette because I am reminded of Mel every year at this time of year because this is the anniversary month of her passing, or if because I legitimately think that this is a fall time eyeshadow palette. I do think that this can lean very, very spring also, but it definitely screams a lot fall to me too. And I think where that comes from for me is this, like, these 3 shadows here, Even some of these top shadows here, like these 4 top shadows here, also remind me a lot of fall. This one here reminds me a lot of fall as kind of like a deep, like dusty mauve shade. I definitely think that this could be more leaning spring because I'm reminded of Mel Thompson during this time of year. I think of this palette more during the fall time frame. I do think that it has some fall leaning shades in it as well. Again, dark, deep, moody tones. Let's talk Natasha Denona Retro. This is very pink, right? It is very pink, but it is also kind of deep and moody on this side of the pink spectrum. And I do think that this reminds me very much of fall, kind of that entry into fall season as far as the shadows go. Now this one does have a lot of pink in it as well, but this one is definitely more seasonally appropriate for fall, in my humble opinion, maybe even mid to late fall, and that is the Star palette. Now this is one that is probably one of my favorite Natasha Denona palettes, and it took me eons really to recognize and realize that for myself, but I just love this color story so dang much. And I also love how these shadows perform so dang much. I love this like blue brown here. It has a nice little flip to it. I really love this as like an inner corner and brow bone highlighty shade with a smidge of glitter. It's more of a topper if I'm honest with you, but this is just deep and moody and really, really fall centric. I also have the Metropolis palette. What would fall be without Metropolis? And it is missing a shade because I pulled that out for my build your own palette, in which I used to create this eye look, which you guys will see very, very soon. I'm sure of it, but there's a lot of redundancy in this palette, so I have a hard time like always showcasing this palette. I do think that there is, you know, this could have been a much smaller eyeshadow palette, but I think that when we think of this in a much smaller way, we get yucca. So ending it all out with the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. It is fall perfection, and I mean, I would love for any one of you to tell me that this is not fall perfection, because I truly think that it is fall perfection. But with that said, that is it. That's all I have. Those are the 20-something fall palettes that I am going to focus on potentially getting some use out of during this quarter of the year, so that they can roll into my No Pan Left Behind. I'm going to leave them out and try really pulling from these guys when I'm looking for that special green or that special jewel tone shadow, because I know that I have them in my collection. And maybe when I do my next build your own palette, it's going to be wrapped around a fall themed shadow palette. Maybe some of these tones will come in out of my single shadows as well. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed the visit, or that you enjoyed the visit. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about my fall palette choices. I would be certainly interested to hear what your fall palette choices are as well. And, you know, I just hope that you enjoyed it, and you'll want to subscribe before you go. Give it a big thumbs up. Tell the world that you loved it. And yeah, you guys, I just hope that you all are doing well. I hope that you are all healthy, happy, getting along as best that you can in this world. I hope that you are all loving each other, being kind humans, and living your best life. And until next time, bye, friends.